Well, what it is we're desperately short of electricity. We're in a crisis, critical shortage of electricity. We really ran out of electricity in about 2007, and since then Eskom has not been able to meet demand, and it's had a devastating effect on our economy. Slowed down economic growth. It's cost us hundreds of billions of rand, if not more. We didn't build power stations in the 1990s when we needed it, and now we need it, and now we've begun to build, but it's going to take a long, long time. The type of electricity we need most is called baseload electricity. This is electricity 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, electricity all the year round. Lots of it, reliable electricity, which is coal and nuclear. In future, maybe gas, maybe imported hydro. That's in the future. Right now, it's coal and nuclear. Coal's fine, but it's dirty. It releases smoke, NOx, SOx, and so forth. And the other big problem is it must be in the northeast of the country because that's where the coal fields are. A typical coal station needs 16 million tons of coal a year. You can't transport that any distance, so you have to build the coal stations where the coal fields are. Nuclear is very clean, it's very safe, and you can build the stations wherever you like. Nuclear power is the cleanest, safest source of energy that we know. And so the best form of baseload energy for South Africa now is nuclear. That's why we need nuclear. Since 2007, we couldn't meet demand. So a lot of projects have been cancelled. A lot of mine shafts that should have been drilled haven't been. We've lost a lot of business there. Even so, we've been struggling to meet demand. That's why we've run these gas turbines. Eskom, in a panic, built gas turbines. Didn't want to run them. They're cheap to build, very, very expensive to run. And Eskom hoped it would never have to run them, but it's had to run them, which means, although demand is lower than it should be, it's still so high that it has to run these. In very recent times, with economic downturn, with the very low, the demand has been less than it should, but still it's too much for Eskom to manage without running the gas turbines. So the potential demand is enormous, and it's going to get bigger and bigger if our economy grows properly. Eskom's power stations were the big coal power stations, which is 90% of our electricity. They were built from about 1970 on. If you say, well, the life of a power station is 40 years, that means that a lot of them are ending their life now and will be in the next 10 years or so. They must be, unless they're extended, which is very difficult, they must be replaced. Something must replace them. And the best thing to replace them is nuclear. Nuclear power all around the world is everywhere, in every single country, affordable, economic, and in lots of countries it's the cheapest source of electricity. These countries include France, South Korea, even Germany, where they were so stupid as to shut them down, is still their cheapest source of electricity. America is their cheapest source of electricity. The problem with nuclear, the capital costs are quite high. That's the big problem. Upfront costs are quite high. But a nuclear power station lasts a long time, nowadays 60 years or more. It's got a very high load factor. That means it produces a lot of electricity compared with its capacity, so that a nuclear power station over its life produces a massive amount of electricity. So the unit costs are actually low. So it, in fact, is affordable. Well, the overnight costs of nuclear now, I'm going to talk now in thousands of dollars per installed kilowatt. If you look at deals around the world, I gave a list in my presentation, they're around about $4,000 per kilowatt, which is quite reasonable. I think the best way of funding new stations is the same way as we funded the coal stations in the past. We're now talking about 9,600 megawatts of nuclear by the year 2030, which, by the way, we won't make. 9,600 megawatts. Well, from about 1970 to 1990, we built 30,000 megawatts of coal, which is 3 times as much and we funded it on debts. In other words, Eskom went to international debt markets. Because Eskom is sovereign debt, more or less, it was very cheap debt. It was safe debt, so it was cheap. And Eskom borrowed, built the power station, paid back the debt in a responsible manner, and it paid back by revenue from sales. And this is exactly what we should do with the nuclear program too. And if you look then, Eskom was then borrowing in apartheid times, when South Africa was the pariah of the world, which made our debt more expensive. Now we're the friend of the world, we're democratic, so it should make our debts cheaper. Although, of course, the problems with our economy and maybe down ratings and so forth. Even so, Eskom bonds and South African bonds, they're still reasonable. 9.5 nominal, which is about 3.5 real. That's cheap debt. So we should fund mainly on debt. The possible contenders is about 5 or 6 countries. There's France, which built Coburg, and they did very well. There's America with their Westinghouse design. It's America-Japanese with a very good AP1000 design. There's Japan, there's South Korea, there's Canada, and there's Russia. And there's China. All of those are possibilities. I'd have to rule out Canada because we don't want their type of design. Probably rule out Japan on their own because their latest designs have been boiling water reactors. France, for me, it was very good, but they've done very badly recently building a power station in Finland at Olkiluoto. It's done very bad. It's behind times, over budget. It's given them a bad name, and it's affected their standing as a vendor. So then you're left with, I'd say that the leading contenders, in my view, are the Americans with the AP1000, the Chinese, who've got a range of reactors, and I'd say probably the leading contender is Russia, because they're built in other countries successfully. They've got the world's most comprehensive nuclear industry. They can do everything themselves. And they've built reactors in other countries successfully. So I'd say probably, to see what happens, if I was betting, I'd say they're the most likely. No, it hasn't been done already. It's full of newspaper talk about a secret deal having been done by the Russians and secret handshake stuff and a secret deal between Moscow and Pretoria. And I think it's a load of nonsense. I think what happened was the South Africans approached, they showed interest, invited to go to Moscow, and some people in Moscow got a bit overexcited, and some radio, I think, said a deal's been done, which hasn't been done. And then the local conspiracy theorists in South Africa, investigative journalists, they all picked up this is a secret deal. I've heard no evidence for it whatsoever. I think there's no secret deal.